Hi, I'm Marla. I never thought my sister's wedding would become the night I learned the truth about my place in the family. They said I was overreacting, too sensitive, too dramatic. But then I saw her, my own sister, leaning toward the chef, whispering something while looking straight at me. 1 hour later, her smile disappeared, and suddenly, the mask cracked. It wasn't just the plate, it was the years of being left out of photos, ignored in toasts, erased from stories we both lived. Why would your own blood want you gone, and still serve you dessert? Do you ever wonder how long someone can smile at you while planning your absence? The drive up to Ojai should have felt like a break. Early November light streamed through the sycamores, dappling the car interior in warm gold. Ellis had cued our favorite road trip playlist, humming under his breath as he tapped the steering wheel in rhythm. I tried to match his ease, nodding along, but my mind kept circling back to the invitation. It had arrived 2 weeks later than everyone else's. Not a call, not even a text. Just a cream envelope with an address label. No handwriting, no note. Inside, the wording was impersonal, stiff, almost like a business memo. You are invited to the wedding of Callista O'Hare and Thomas V. Prescott. Then, in small type at the bottom, if you're unable to attend, we understand. No RSVP card, just a QR code. I remember staring at it, wondering if it had been meant for me at all. Is this her way of saying, "Don't come," without actually saying it? I'd asked Ellis at the time, trying to sound amused. He didn't answer, just took the envelope from my hand and turned it over as if something might fall out. It didn't. We pulled into the circular driveway of the Ojai Valley Inn, a pristine, sun-soaked resort nestled against the hills. Everything was perfect, the kind of place you'd expect for a wedding that wanted to be featured in a magazine. Valets in crisp uniforms greeted us. Someone offered champagne before we even made it to the check-in desk. Ellis smiled, always the diplomat. Don't let this place make you shrink. I gave a tight nod, but the knot in my chest wouldn't budge. At check-in, the staff handed us a welcome bag, lavender sachets, local honey, and a note from the bride and groom. Well, from Callista and Thomas. It was signed only by them, no mention of family. My name was typed wrong on the envelope. Marina instead of Marla. It's just a typo, Ellis said. Sure. And maybe the world was just full of coincidences. As we made our way toward the rehearsal dinner that evening, everything around us gleamed. Gold accents on the table settings, soft jazz drifting from the courtyard, waiters moving like ghosts. I spotted Gloria near the far end of the patio. She wore navy blue, her hair pinned in a tight bun, talking animatedly with someone I didn't recognize. When her eyes caught mine, her smile faltered for half a second, then returned with polite efficiency. She gave a small wave, then turned back to her conversation. Callista approached moments later, flanked by 2 bridesmaids. She looked stunning. Of course she did. Her white dress wasn't bridal yet, but it shimmered like a hint of what was to come. She gave me a once-over, then a smile that stopped short of her eyes. No hug. No, I'm glad you're here. Glad you made it, she said simply, then turned to Ellis. And you, of course. We chatted briefly, surface-level words about traffic and weather. She excused herself before I could say anything real. Ellis leaned in. Let's just stay civil for now. He didn't have to explain. I'd trained myself over the years. Bite the inside of your cheek, nod when others talk over you, laugh when it's your moment being ignored. Keep the peace. At the reception dinner, we were led past round tables dressed in ivory linen and gold centerpieces. Names glistened in elegant cursive on glass placeholders. I scanned the room. Friends, cousins, even distant relatives were placed near the front, close to the head table. Our place cards were near the back, right beside the kitchen doors. Every few minutes, a server burst through with a tray. The door would swing wide, slam softly against the stopper, then close again. I could smell every plate before I saw it. The clatter of silverware behind me made it impossible to hear the toasts. A breeze from the hallway brushed the back of my neck each time the door opened. Callista and her new husband sat beneath a canopy of fairy lights. Center stage. Gloria dabbed at her eyes, looking every inch the mother of the bride. I glanced down at my plate. The food was beautifully arranged, but I had no appetite. I thought of Dad's funeral. The program had no mention of me. No speaking role. Just Callista, standing tall in black, delivering a flawless eulogy like it was another PR campaign. Afterward, when I asked about it, she'd said, "You've never liked public speaking. I didn't want you to feel uncomfortable." She always framed exclusion as protection. Callista had once joked that she handled the presentation side of the family while I did the logistics. I remember laughing then. I wasn't laughing now. I took a sip of champagne and tried not to let my face show anything. What's worse, I thought, being left out, or realizing you've learned how to make yourself invisible to avoid feeling it? The string quartet played a lilting version of "Outlast." Guests cooed and clapped as the couple twirled through their first dance. I stayed seated, tracing the rim of my glass with one finger. Ellis leaned close. "You okay?" "I get the feeling," I whispered. "I wasn't meant to be seen today." As I looked up again, Callista was by the bar. She leaned toward the chef, eyes locked, mouth forming words too soft to hear. And for a flicker of a second, her gaze darted in my direction. The courtyard was glowing. Late afternoon light filtered through the sycamores as guests took their seats, murmuring softly. Everything shimmered. Linen, glassware, even the air. I sat with Ellis near the aisle, 2 rows behind Gloria, who was already dabbing at her eyes like a Hollywood widow. My dress clung a bit tighter than I remembered. Or maybe it was the tension. Callista stood at the front in an ivory gown that fit her like a magazine spread. She radiated poise, the kind that made you forget anything awkward ever happened around her. She cleared her throat, and the courtyard fell silent. "I want to thank everyone who helped make today so perfect," she began, voice smooth, polished. "My bridal team, my cousins, our amazing planner, and of course, my mother, who raised me to believe in love." There was polite applause. Ellis shifted slightly beside me. He didn't look over, but I knew he felt it too. No mention of me, not a syllable. Even the bartender, the one with the tattoo sleeve, who barely knew our last name, got a nod. But the sister who'd reviewed every vendor contract, fought with the caterer over dietary options, drove to Ojai 3 times for tastings. She wasn't there. Not in that moment. I stared ahead, blinking slowly, letting her words slide off me like rain on glass. I didn't need applause. I just didn't expect erasure. After the vows and the rings and the obligatory kiss, guests meandered toward the cocktail area. Champagne flowed, conversation fluttered. Callista moved through the crowd like a senator, graceful, rehearsed, adored. I stayed close to Ellis, sipping slowly. Then came the toast. She tapped a glass with a fork. "I'd like to raise a toast to the people who truly helped this wedding come together." I stiffened. She beamed. "My childhood besties, Ashley and Brooke, who've stood by me through every meltdown. My glam team, geniuses. My Aunt Helena, who saved us on florals. And my stylist, who quite literally made me sparkle today." Laughter, cheers. I felt like a statue. Ellis's hand found mine under the table. I didn't squeeze back. Weeks of emails, spreadsheets, schedule juggling. I hadn't done it for applause. But silence this loud feels like betrayal. Like someone staring you in the face and saying, "You were never in the room." And then came Jessica. Bridesmaid, blonde, overly enthused. She floated up to us, glass in hand, voice syrupy. "So Marla, do you feel weird not having a real role today?" Ellis turned his head sharply. I smiled. Thin, tired. "Oh, I'm just here to support. That's what sisters do, right?" Jessica blinked, a little too slowly. "Totally. It's just... I figured you'd be, I don't know, giving a speech or something. I mean, you're her only sibling." She drifted away before I could reply. Ellis leaned in. "You okay?" "I've been okay for so long. It doesn't even register anymore. The reception dinner began. Callista changed into a second dress, off-white, full-skirted, custom-tailored drama. Guests fawned. Flashbulbs popped. I sat at our table, watching her laugh with Thomas, watching her glide from guest to guest. A memory surfaced, us as kids, playing tea party in the backyard. She'd always assign roles. "You be the helper," she'd said. "I'll be the princess." Back then, I didn't know better. Today, I recognized the choreography, the same script, just with champagne. Ellis refilled my glass. "I think I'm not here by accident," I said quietly. "I'm here to be erased," politely. "You're not crazy," he said. "I've watched this happen all day." I didn't cry. I planned. Because sometimes betrayal doesn't come with a knife. It comes with a smile that stops just before your name. Then, just after the salad course was cleared, I saw her do it. Callista leaned in and whispered something to the chef. Dinner service had been announced, but the transition between courses gave guests time to mingle, refill their drinks, and admire the finer touches of the venue. I stepped away from our table under the guise of checking my phone. In truth, I needed air, mental space, more than anything. The hallway adjacent to the reception room had been transformed into a curated gallery. Soft piano music floated from hidden speakers, the lighting dimmed just enough to make everything feel warm and intentional. Along the cream walls hung photos, framed memories printed large and mounted like pieces of art. I walked slowly. The first frame showed Callista in a tutu at 5 years old, flanked by 2 of her childhood friends. The next, a family beach photo, all windswept hair and khaki pants. Another frame, prom night, Callista mid-laugh, a boy's arm looped around her waist. One after another, the same story, moments frozen in time. And in every one of them, I was gone. Not cropped, absent. It wasn't subtle, it was surgical. At first, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe these were just her memories, her moments. But as I moved further down the hallway, the narrative was too clean, too deliberate. Thanksgiving dinners where I'd carved the turkey, Christmas mornings when I held the camera. I remembered being there. I reached a frame labeled Family Reunion 2004. The entire clan was there, parents, aunts, cousins, even that uncle from Tucson no one really liked. I wasn't in the photo. That one I remembered vividly. Gloria had said, "Oh," Marla blinked, "we'll retake it." They never did. The implication hit hard. I hadn't been forgotten. I'd been excluded, on purpose. I felt a shift behind me, soft steps and perfume I knew too well. Gloria stood next to me, hands clasped in front of her, staring at the same frame. "Don't ruin this for her, okay?" she said quietly. "Just enjoy what you can." It wasn't a request. It was a muzzle. I didn't turn to her. I didn't speak, just nodded. She lingered a moment longer, then walked away, her heels clicking softly on the polished floor. "If keeping the peace costs you your dignity," I whispered under my breath, "it's not peace." Back inside the reception room, I saw things differently. Every group photo forming near the dance floor excluded me by design. Toasts were offered, but my name never came up. I stood off to the side, unnoticed, and for the first time, I realized the invisibility gave me a kind of power. If they weren't watching me, they wouldn't see me planning. As dessert plates clinked and champagne flowed, I sat back and observed. Observed how people flattered Callista, treated her like a CEO at her own gala. How Gloria smoothed every bump, laughed a little too loudly, and watched me only when she thought I wasn't looking. My role in this family wasn't a mistake. It was a designation. The silent one. The helper. The backstage crew in a show I was never allowed to headline. Years ago, I'd been told, "You know how Callista gets. Don't provoke her." Translation, make yourself smaller, make her shine. And I had, again and again. But now I saw it for what it was. They hadn't just omitted me from a photo. They had written a version of our family that didn't include me at all. And if that's the story they wanted to tell, then I had no reason to stay in it. I turned back toward the hallway, eyes adjusting to the warm shadows. The reception hummed behind me. I was about to walk away from the gallery when I saw her, Callista, leaning near the kitchen door. She was speaking to someone I recognized. Dinner service began with the kind of coordination you only get from overpriced planning. String lights twinkled like it was all magic. Guests laughed, clinked glasses, passed buttered rolls. But my focus had narrowed to a scene playing out near the catering tent, just beyond the trellis arch covered in white roses. Callista stood beside the chef. It wasn't a long conversation, just a lean-in, a nod, a quiet word. But the chef didn't nod back like he was getting instructions on salad dressing. He nodded like he understood a secret, a shared task, something they'd rehearsed. She didn't glance my way. She didn't have to. A queen doesn't whisper to the help unless it matters. I returned to our table, just in time for the waiters to start serving the entree. Plates glided onto the table like synchronized choreography. I looked at mine. Glazed sea bass, asparagus, truffle mash. Beautiful. But the glaze looked thicker than Ellis's. Glossier. The garnish was different too. More herbs, something extra dusted across the top. Ellis leaned in. Looks fancy. I smiled barely. Yeah, maybe too fancy. I glanced around. Plates were being served with consistency, except mine. My stomach tightened, but I kept my face neutral. This was the sort of moment where reaction could make you look crazy. The kind of moment that gets dismissed as nerves or wedding stress. I'd been here before. 7 years ago, at a restaurant, a trace of peanut oil in a stir-fry had put me in the ER. Callista had cried louder than I had choked, telling everyone how guilty she felt. That night, she'd said, "I told the waiter you were allergic. He must have messed it up." And maybe he had. I'd believed her. Now? I wasn't so sure. I looked at Ellis's plate again. The differences weren't massive, but they were enough. And then, his hand found mine under the table. He didn't say anything, just squeezed, firm. Then, very softly, he said, "Don't touch that yet." It wasn't fear in his voice. It was control. The same tone he used when catching inconsistencies in investment pitches, when something didn't add up. He stared at my plate a moment longer, then turned his attention back to the table, casual. I didn't ask questions. Not yet. The room buzzed, glasses clinked. Callista walked from table to table, all sparkle and laughter, stopping for compliments and quick selfies. Nobody was watching me, and she made sure of that. Except, I caught her glancing my way. Once. Just a flicker. And she smiled. Not the kind of smile you give your sister, the kind you give when you've already won. I reached for my fork. My hand paused midair. Maya Angelou once said, "When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time." I believed her now. I pulled my hand back, and I smiled back at Callista, just as hollow, just as calculated. The decision came fast. Don't escalate, don't accuse, just observe, record, protect yourself. I leaned slightly toward Ellis. "We need a quiet place, 5 minutes." He didn't hesitate. The hallway by the gallery, no cameras, low traffic. We stood like nothing was wrong, like we were just stretching our legs between courses. I dropped my clutch into my palm, thumb already sliding the phone inside into record mode. Whatever this was, it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a move. And if she thought I wouldn't see it, she hadn't paid attention to the version of me I'd become. I didn't know it yet, but someone else had already noticed, and they were about to tell me something that would change everything. I returned to the table just as the main course was being placed in front of me. Sea bass, again. But this time with a glaze that gleamed unnaturally under the soft candlelight. A sprig of microgreens perched on the edge like a designer's final touch. Ellis glanced at his plate, then at mine. "They don't look the same," he said, barely moving his lips. I leaned closer. "They're not." His was lightly seared, with a matte finish and minimal garnish. Mine looked dressed, as if someone had specifically asked the kitchen to zhuzh it up. The smell hit me next, faint but unmistakable. A sweetness I didn't recognize. Something slick on the edges of the glaze. I pushed the plate a few inches away. Ellis didn't need a word from me. He put his fork down and shifted his attention back to the rest of the table, like we were simply pausing to chat. Nobody else noticed. No one ever noticed when the slight was subtle. That's how it worked. And that's when my phone buzzed. One line. A name I hadn't seen in 2 years. Delaney Knox. The screen lit up. Need 2 mins. Seat isn't safe. I stared at the message, pulse spiking. Delaney had been Callista's best friend in high school. We used to be close, once upon a time, before alliances shifted. I hadn't spoken to her since my father's funeral. I slipped out of my chair, murmuring to Ellis, "I need to take this." He gave a short nod. "Don't go far." The hallway off the main room was quieter, dimmer. A few guests passed by on their way to the restrooms, but otherwise, it was private. Delaney waited near a side window, her hair pinned up, eyes scanning nervously until they landed on me. "Marla," she said. "Thank God!" I stopped a few feet from her. "What's going on?" "I overheard something at the tasting 2 weeks ago," she said quickly. "Callista was talking to the chef. I didn't think much of it at the time. She made a joke about ingredients and allergies, said something like, 'Let's make sure it's extra special.' Then she mentioned your name." My voice stayed level. "And the oil?" "She brought up peanut oil." Delaney's eyes dropped. I thought she was being sarcastic. I mean, who does that? I didn't answer. I didn't have to. "You have to believe me. I didn't know she was serious." I nodded slowly. "Sometimes silence isn't consent. It's data collection." Delaney looked down again. I should have said something sooner. "You're saying it now." The air between us shifted. A quiet understanding passed like a trade. "She's counting on people thinking this is nothing," I said. "A garnish, a kitchen error." "I know. If I ask you later, will you put that in writing?" Delaney hesitated only a beat. "Yes." I thanked her and walked back toward the ballroom, footsteps steady. Inside, the music had changed. Servers were clearing plates, pouring fresh wine. I returned to my seat and gently pushed the plate aside. A server approached. "Excuse me," I said softly. "Would it be possible to have the same entree he has?" I gestured to Ellis. "Just a preference?" The server smiled and nodded. "Of course." No scene, no drama. But when I glanced across the room, Callista's eyes were on me. She tilted her head slightly. The smile on her face never reached her eyes this time either. There was a flicker of something else. Unease. Ellis leaned closer. "She knows we saw it." "She does," I said, "but she doesn't know what we're doing about it." I reached into my clutch, flicked open my notes app, and started logging. Time, table position, Delaney's message, the plate photo I snapped just before leaving the table. "We need to start collecting," I whispered. Ellis didn't miss a beat. "Already on it." As we slipped back into the rhythm of the evening, documenting in plain sight, I realized we weren't reacting anymore. We were strategizing. And just before dessert was served, I caught Callista whispering again. This time, not to the chef, but to a man I hadn't seen in years. The moment I saw him, I knew. By the vendor's entrance, standing too comfortably close to Callista, was a man in a slim black chef's coat and polished shoes. His beard was trimmed tighter than it used to be, and he wore a grin that didn't fit the moment. Silas Rudd. Of all the people to show up here. Silas had once been knee-deep in a legal mess involving health violations and defamation threats from a food blogger. I had quietly helped Delaney structure his case, off the record, mostly for practice, back when I was still establishing myself. Callista had somehow been roped into the cleanup, scrubbing things off the internet, spinning narratives. She'd framed it as a favor, but I knew the look she gave him now. This wasn't friendly. This was transactional. Nothing's free in family, or in blackmail. I eased back toward our table, mind buzzing. Ellis looked up the second I sat. "I checked your original plate," he said under his breath. "Definitely peanut oil. Light scent, but traceable. It's not on the others." My hands stayed calm. "Have the server box it. Say I'm not feeling well." Ellis nodded. "Smart." The server returned, and I offered a gentle smile. "Would you mind wrapping this to go for me? Might need it later." They nodded and vanished without suspicion. I pulled out my phone and began quietly documenting. A photo of the plate, a timestamp. Then I wrote one sentence in my legal notes app. "Intent is forming." Ellis watched. "Now we've got physical evidence. Motive won't be far." I didn't need motive handed to me. I could see it coming in waves. As I stepped aside to breathe near the gift display, I heard Gloria's unmistakable voice. "Oh yes, isn't it lovely? The cookware came from a dear friend of the family," she beamed to a group of guests. I looked over. She was gesturing to the exact set I had ordered 2 months ago. Hand-selected, monogrammed, a gift I'd poured thought into. I even remembered the handwritten tag I'd attached. I approached the assistant at the gift table. "Hey, I think there was a tag on that set. Enameled pans with the gold handles?" I kept my tone light. They flipped through a small box of tags. "That one came in unmarked," they said. A little too quickly. No card was attached when it arrived. I stared at the set. My name had been wiped from it, like dust brushed off a polished surface. No scene, no comment. But in my head, the ledger grew longer. Back at our table, Ellis handed me his phone. "Read this." It was a screenshot of Delaney's follow-up message. "Callista told me the day she mailed your invite. I'm not inviting her to join, I'm inviting her to watch. Said you needed to be humbled, her exact words." I felt my jaw tighten. This was never about inclusion. Ellis sipped his wine. It was about replacement. I didn't answer. I opened my email instead. To paralegalmyfirm.com. Subject, start case file, internal malice attachments, plate photo, guest messages, timeline draft. In the body, I wrote, "Flag for confidential conflict. Draft protection motion. This may escalate." It was cold. It was clean. It was me finally refusing to make myself smaller. She used my kindness as her loophole. Now I'll use her negligence as my foundation. Later that evening, as glasses refilled and dessert prep began, Callista stood for her final toast. "Tonight has been the most beautiful experience of my life," she said, voice sugar-sweet. "I'm overwhelmed by the love and support in this room." I raised my glass with the rest. I didn't drink. The crowd clapped. Gloria dabbed her eyes. Flashbulbs clicked. But I knew the truth. It was her stage. Tonight, I built the spotlight. And just when I thought I had all the pieces, someone else stepped forward. With the final edge I hadn't seen coming. The clink of champagne flutes and the first few notes of a cake-cutting song floated through the room as Delaney slid beside me. Her entrance was so seamless, no one noticed. That had always been her skill, slipping into a moment like she belonged there, even when she didn't. "I need to talk to you," she whispered, just loud enough for me to hear. I stepped a few feet away from the crowd with her, toward the wall near the dessert table. Delaney's hands were clenched. I didn't say anything earlier because I didn't know how deep she was going. But after what I saw tonight, after that plate, you need to know. I looked her square in the face. "Say it." "She told me last month, at the tasting. She said you were the cautionary tale, that you still believed being nice would make you necessary." Delaney swallowed. She laughed when she said it. The burn in my throat wasn't from the wine. "And you said nothing?" "I was wrong, but I kept the texts, the call recordings. I thought I was just being careful. I didn't think I'd need them." My voice was low. "Now you know why we keep records." Delaney nodded slowly. "I'll send them tonight. I already zipped everything." I thanked her with nothing more than a look. Then I moved to the edge of the room, pretending to check my phone. The video from my clutch camera had finished processing. I played it once. Silent, small screen. Enough to confirm what I'd suspected. Callista standing with the chef, pointing at my plate, nodding toward my seat. The chef reaching for a dark bottle, shaking it into a silver mixing bowl. Ellis leaned over. Is that it? I nodded. Clear as day. Enough to go public? No, I said. Enough to go legal. Callista returned from the kitchen with her usual glide, head held high. Her second gown shimmered beneath the ceiling lights. She made her way to the center of the floor, pausing to accept a hug, a compliment, a camera angle. She hadn't seen me yet. Until she did. Our eyes locked, and for the first time all evening, I didn't look away. I tilted my head, lifted my glass, and smiled. Callista blinked. Just once. A flinch so fast most people wouldn't have caught it. But I wasn't most people. She doesn't know what I have, but she knows I've got something. I walked away from the crowd and ducked into the hallway near the vendor access. Pulled up my email, attached the video, screenshots from Delaney, photos of the dish, to legalmyfirm.com, subject, if anything happens to me, body, timeline enclosed, primary target, Callista O'Hare. I hit send. Then I encrypted a Dropbox folder and backed it up twice. Strong women don't always roar. Sometimes they record. Back inside, a speech was beginning. Callista stood next to Thomas, raising a glass, eyes sweeping the room. Halfway through her toast, her hand trembled. She dropped her glass. Gasps scattered. A server rushed forward. Gloria stood, but Callista waved her off, cheeks flushing beneath her makeup. Gloria leaned in, her voice too sharp to be motherly. What's going on with you? Callista muttered something, but I caught it. She's just watching me. You're damn right I am. Ellis touched my elbow. One more push. I excused myself briefly, stepping outside into the cool evening air. I needed to breathe somewhere that didn't stink of cover-ups and champagne. The stars were just beginning to peek out. I pulled out my phone. Text to Delaney. Tonight's the night. If I send reveal, you hit send. Everything. Her reply came instantly. Understood. I walked back into the ballroom, chin up, back straight. My phone buzzed in my hand, and just as I reached for it, I saw the name flash across the screen. Chef Silas Rudd was calling me. The pantry hallway was quiet. Too quiet. I'd stepped outside the main reception to answer the call, expecting a brief check-in. Instead, I heard a voice I hadn't heard in years. Marla, it's Silas. I said nothing. I just wanted you to know, I didn't think she meant for it to go that far. She told me it was symbolic. Just a nudge. Enough to make a point, not to hurt anyone. I stepped further away from the noise of the wedding. And yet, I said, you did it. A pause. I was in debt to her. I owed her a favor. She reminded me of it. Reminded you, I repeated, as if that makes it less cowardly. I didn't know she was serious. No, I said. You didn't want to believe she was. Silence on the line. I'll write a statement, Silas said. Whatever you need. I hung up without answering. Back in the reception, dessert had begun to circulate. Chocolate mousse with a delicate raspberry drizzle. The kind of dessert people photographed before touching. Callista stood near the head table again, glass in hand. She raised it for a second toast. To sisters, she said. Her voice quivered, almost imperceptibly. To the ones who shape us, whether they mean to or not. Her hand shook slightly as she lowered the glass. I opened my phone under the table, scrolled to Delaney's contact, and typed one word. Reveal. Then I hit send. Across the room, Delaney looked up, read her screen, and began moving. One by one, phones buzzed. Screens lit up. Quiet ripples of conversation spread like wildfire. The moment was ready. Ellis, bless him, chose that exact moment to say aloud, just loud enough, just public enough. Good thing we switched her plate. A fork clattered. Callista turned slowly, What? Gloria asked, her voice like wind through dry grass. Ellis didn't flinch. Her plate, the one with the peanut glaze, I swapped it before she ate. You could hear the shift in air pressure. People turned. Murmurs started. Callista's eyes darted from Ellis to me. That wasn't supposed to. That wasn't for her, she stammered. Gloria looked pale. Peanut glaze? I didn't plan, Callista began. You didn't plan for me to be here, I said calmly. You planned for me to be small. The silence broke as someone mirrored their phone screen to a projector. Delaney's doing. The footage played. Callista speaking to Silas, gesturing, nodding. The moment caught and broadcast in high definition. Then came the screenshots, the text, the audio clips. The sauce, as it turned out, wasn't toxic, but it was tainted. Traces of peanut oil, just enough to stir panic in someone with a known allergy. It was never meant to kill, just to humiliate, to make a point. But that point backfired. I stood still as the room turned against her. Not with anger, with disgust. What kind of sister does this? Gloria stumbled back into her seat, face drained of color. You did this? To your own blood? Callista looked around, her expression fraying. She's always been the favorite. Dad left her more. Everyone always looked at her like she was the good one. I had to do something. No, I said. You chose to do something. Her face twisted. You were always the one he trusted. Always. And you never did anything with it. I stepped closer, voice steady. You didn't just plan an attack. You planned a version of this night where I disappeared. The guests stood awkwardly. Some walked out. Others looked between us, unsure where to land their sympathy. Gloria didn't look at either of us. She stared straight ahead, unmoving. Ellis reached for my hand, but I didn't take it. I wasn't ready for comfort. I had delivered the truth, and I wasn't going to soften it for anyone. As the crowd thinned, I watched Callista turn toward the exit, back still straight, but her stride no longer confident. But as everyone turned toward the exits, I realized I hadn't even shown them the worst yet. The reception room felt colder now, though nothing had changed physically. Same string lights, same centerpieces, same soundtrack of instrumental hits. But the energy had shifted, deep and irreversible. Guests murmured in tight clusters, eyes darting toward me, away from Callista, back again. The laughter was gone. Ellis remained standing behind me, unmoving, hands clasped in front of him like a bodyguard at a courtroom hearing. I stayed seated, dignified, steady. No tears. Just that sensation you get after a storm when the wind finally dies and the damage stands in full view. People always say the truth will set you free, but they never tell you about the blast radius. A cousin I hadn't seen since Dad's funeral passed behind me, not realizing how close I was. She whispered to someone beside her. I always heard she was unstable. Guess now we know why she got that inheritance? It wasn't a new rumor. It was an old one, polished smooth through years of retelling. Callista's voice again. Back when Dad made me his primary health proxy, back when I rearranged my job schedule and practically moved in with him. She hadn't visited once in his final 6 months, but somehow I was manipulating the old man, according to whispers. This wasn't just about a plate, it was about years of careful character assassination disguised as concern. I caught Gloria looking at me, her expression unreadable, perhaps finally realizing she'd co-signed a narrative without ever asking for the facts. I didn't flinch, not even when the MC took the mic. There's been a change in tonight's program, he said, eyes flicking briefly toward Callista. Unfortunately, the planned toast from the bride's sister won't be happening. I sat still. My fingers curled around the stem of my wine glass, but I didn't drink. Marla had prepared that speech 2 weeks ago, and last night, during the final walkthrough, I'd been assured my name was on the schedule. But now, no explanation, just gone. Instead, one of Callista's college roommates, Ashley, with her beach-waved hair and cloying voice, took the mic and launched into a tale about spring break in Cabo and how Callista has always known how to get what she wants. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so grotesque. Ellis leaned close. "You want to let this go?" I shook my head once. "No." I stood, quietly. No fuss. Just walked toward the AV booth in the corner. The tech looked up from his console. "Can I borrow the mic?" I asked, voice calm. He blinked, glanced toward the stage, then handed it over without a word. I stepped up beside the band setup, not on the stage, just enough for people to turn. A few conversations died mid-sentence. "I wasn't going to speak tonight," I said into the mic, steady as ever. "But sometimes silence does more harm than truth ever could." The room stilled. I didn't come here tonight to expose anyone. I came to celebrate a marriage. But when someone spends years telling everyone you're the unstable one, the dramatic one, the problem, eventually you start to believe that staying quiet is noble. I looked straight at Callista. But staying quiet just gives your enemy more room to rewrite your part of the story. Murmurs. Then quiet again. What happened here tonight didn't start tonight. And it ends now. I handed the mic back, walked off as if I'd just said my piece at a town hall. Some guests clapped. Some didn't know what to do. Gloria looked ghost white. Callista stood frozen near the cake table, blinking rapidly. Then she turned and disappeared through the back doors, heels clicking too fast. Ellis met me halfway and took my hand. "You did it," he said, "without ever raising your voice." "Loud isn't always strong," I replied, "but clarity always is." I stepped outside, slipped off my heels, and let the cool flagstones ground me. Above, the sky had deepened into navy. I listened as the reception team started clearing glasses. Chairs scraped gently across the floor inside. Let them clean it up. They built the mess. I just stopped playing the maid. But the truth had legs, and by the next morning, it had reached people even Callista never meant to see it. The next morning, we sat in the hotel's breakfast lounge, surrounded by the quiet murmur of clinking spoons and hushed gossip. The air felt heavier than it should have. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, but even that couldn't bleach away the film of discomfort that had settled over everything. Ellis sipped his coffee slowly, phone face down on the table. Mine buzzed nonstop. Texts from extended family, 3 missed calls from Gloria, and a string of media pings from numbers I didn't recognize. I ignored them all. "When truth shows up at your wedding uninvited," I said, staring at my untouched croissant, "it never brings a gift. It just collects debt." He smirked without humor. "And it keeps the receipts." Back upstairs, I started packing, but something about the dress tugged at me. I pulled it from the garment bag. From the front, it looked fine. Still pressed, still beautiful. But the hem was uneven. I knelt down and turned it over. There it was, a quick, shoddy stitch job covering a deliberate tear. Not a snag, a slice. The thread was a shade off, rushed, and suddenly I remembered, earlier that day, the stylist Callista had hired last minute, had loitered too long outside the dressing room. Said she was adjusting Callista's veil. She must have had time. It wasn't just the plate. She wanted the moment I stood to speak, to toast, to look put together. She wanted that moment undercut, undermined, sabotaged. I folded the dress quietly and set it aside. Then my phone rang. "Dr. Keene," I answered, voice low. "Marla," he said. "I got something strange. Someone anonymously sent me a photo of your entree from last night, and a short note detailing the contents." My chest tightened. "And?" "I ran it through the allergen profile you're flagged under. It wouldn't have killed you, but it could have caused a severe enough reaction with wine to land you in the hospital." I didn't speak. He continued softer. "It fits the legal parameters of intentional allergen exposure." "I need you to document it formally," I said. "Signed. Medical letterhead. I already started." I hung up, moved to my laptop, and sat beside Ellis, who had already opened his own. "We ready?" he asked. I nodded. Together, we assembled the package. Time-stamped photos of the dish, video of Callista with Silas, Delaney's text thread, the recording, the dress photos, the whole timeline. Then I composed the email. To callistaoagency.com, subject, legal forthcoming body. You can either respond via your attorney, or I can let mine initiate the process. You have 24 hours. M. No venom. No flourish. Just consequences. A few hours later, Callista's agency issued a one-sentence statement. A private family matter has been regrettably exaggerated, but the internet didn't care for polite lies. Screenshots spread. A wedding blogger picked it up, then someone on Reddit. By evening, it was trending under Sakir's sibling sabotage. Gloria called twice, left a voicemail the second time. "Marla, we need to talk." I didn't call her back. Ellis leaned on the balcony, watching the clouds shift. "They're panicking." I tucked my laptop away. Let them chase their own shadows now. Before we left, I called the security company, updated my locks, changed my legal contact preferences. Then I opened my will, adjusted beneficiaries, and left a note to my attorney regarding Callista's share, should anything ever happen to me. Later, I sent flowers to Dr. Keene's office. The card read, "You believed me before I showed proof. Thank you." That evening, wrapped in my robe, I stood in front of the mirror and looked at myself. No makeup, no noise, no one else's narrative. I touched my collarbone, as if reminding myself that I existed under all the damage. "My name has weight now," I whispered, and I earned every ounce of it. The letter from Callista's attorney arrived that night, and it didn't say what I thought it would. 2 days after the reception detonated in public view, a courier knocked on my apartment door. I knew what it was before I even opened the envelope. Callista's legal team had finally responded. The letter inside was 4 pages long, printed on heavy cream-colored stock, as if quality paper could mask the weight of hollow words. The tone was calculated, sterile. Regret appeared 3 times, responsibility not once. They referred to the incident as an unfortunate misunderstanding and mentioned emotional duress as a shared experience, not a crime. They weren't sorry for what they did. They were sorry they got caught. I placed the letter on my kitchen counter, walked away, and didn't look at it again. Later that evening, my phone buzzed again. Gloria. I didn't answer. A voicemail came through anyway. "I don't know how to fix this," she said, her voice tight, tired. "I don't even know if I want to." I didn't save the message out of sentiment. I saved it to remind myself of a truth that took decades to learn. Letting go doesn't always mean healing. Sometimes it just means stopping the bleed. I went to the balcony, slid the door open, and let the evening air wash over me. Across the skyline, the city buzzed, indifferent to everything that had collapsed in my orbit. Online, Callista's social accounts had gone dark. Her agency posted a notice that she was taking time to prioritize mental health. The irony was almost laughable. Ellis showed me a Reddit thread that had gone viral. How to survive a narcissistic sibling's wedding. People were sharing stories that mirrored mine like echoes in a canyon. Different details, same betrayal. I laughed, not bitter, just real. Healing doesn't always feel triumphant. Sometimes it feels like breathing in for the first time without checking if anyone else is watching. That weekend, I drove to my father's old house. The one I used to care for when he was sick, where the roses we'd planted together still bloomed along the fence line. I walked the path we built by hand. Each stepping stone poured and set one summer when the sun never seemed to go down. At the base of the oldest white rose bush, I knelt, dug just beneath the surface, and placed a folded note. "I did what you taught me. I didn't flinch." No one would read it. It wasn't for them. It was for me. Back in the city, I finalized the paperwork Ellis and I had been discussing. donating part of my inheritance to a nonprofit that helps women extricate themselves from toxic family systems. Money couldn't erase what happened, but it could pay for someone else's escape. This gives the pain purpose, I told Ellis. He nodded. That's more than most people ever get. That night, after cleaning the dishes and turning off the lights, I found myself scrolling through old videos. One from my 7th birthday party started to play. The screen wobbled with camcorder shake as Dad handed me a cake. Callista leaned into frame, all smiles and sparkles. Watching it now, I saw it clearly. The smile wasn't sweet, it was strategic. They were never kind, just calculated. I didn't cry. I closed the laptop and stood, walked to every window in my apartment, and opened them wide. Let it all out, let it all go. The only thing left was to live again. But this time, for myself. 2 days after the letter from her lawyer, another courier arrived. No ceremony this time. Just a man in a windbreaker who barely made eye contact as he handed over the envelope. Inside wasn't a settlement. It was a full withdrawal. Attached to the letter was a signed confession from Silas Rudd, acknowledging the food tampering and identifying Callista as the one who gave the instruction. Her signature followed his. Clean, tight, deliberate. The page also included confirmation that her agency had officially dissolved that morning. No denial, no half-truths. A drafted apology was enclosed, hollow but precise. Her public surrender, wrapped in the language of accountability. I folded the paper and placed it in a file. Ellis walked in, coffee in hand. So? She surrendered, signed everything, no fight. She always liked control, he said. This lets her pretend she still has some. I nodded. But this isn't where it ends. That afternoon, I sent the full collection, documents, videos, timelines, to a journalist I trusted. Not someone who hunted for scandals or sold stories to gossip blogs. This was a woman who ran a trauma-informed podcast and newsletter about generational dysfunction and family manipulation. Her reply was swift and calm. We'll protect you. We'll do it right. I didn't want revenge. I wanted someone else, anyone else, sitting in a silence like mine to feel less alone. 48 hours later, the story went live. Not sensational, but honest. The title read, Sisterhood Doesn't Excuse Violence, and beneath it, my story unfolded in soft, factual paragraphs that said everything without screaming. The ripple effect came fast. News outlets picked it up. Public discourse exploded. People stopped referring to Callista as the branding genius and started describing her as a cautionary example. The shift didn't feel like victory, it felt like oxygen. Later that week, I wrote one last letter, by hand. Not to Callista, to Gloria. Mom, I know you won't say sorry, so I'll say it for you. I'm sorry I waited so long to stop needing it. This is not an invitation, it's closure. I mailed it without a return address. That Sunday, I hosted a small brunch. Just 4 of us. Ellis, Delaney, Dr. Keene, and me. No photographers, no speeches, no toasts beyond the one I quietly raised. To those who didn't have to choose me, but did. We clinked glasses. No one said anything for a moment. Then Delaney murmured, That felt better than anything I've read in a Hallmark card. I smiled. Family isn't DNA. It's who shows up at your lowest and stays. After the dishes were cleared and the final hugs exchanged, I walked alone to the cemetery. The sky had that soft, peachy hue that only California evenings seemed to master. I found my father's grave, knelt by the white rose I'd left before, and placed a new one beside it. I didn't stay long, just enough to whisper, The girl you raised didn't just survive, she taught others how. Then I walked away. There is no next chapter for her. But there's one for me, and this time, I write it with no need to be seen, just free.